Have you ever noticed how a single childhood summer used to feel endless, but now an entire year seems to disappear in what feels like a few weeks? You're not imagining it, and you're not losing your mind. There's a real reason your brain does this, and understanding it might be the key to actually slowing time back down. Almost everyone feels this strange acceleration as they get older, yet very few people ever ask why it happens or whether anything can be done about it. Is it just a side effect of having more responsibilities? Or is there something much deeper going on inside your brain's relationship with reality itself? By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why time speeds up with age, and more importantly, the one deliberate hack that can make your life feel longer, richer, and slower. Starting almost immediately, let's start with what's actually happening inside your brain. Your sense of time isn't measured by a clock somewhere in your head. It's constructed entirely from memory, specifically from how many distinct separate memories your brain files away during a given period. When something is new, your brain has to pay close attention, encoding every detail carefully because it doesn't yet know what matters. That intense encoding process creates dense, rich memories. And here's the key part: the more memories you form, the longer that period of time feels in retrospect. One of the most fascinating explanations for why time compresses as we age comes down to something called the proportional theory. When you were 5 years old, 1 year represented 20% of your entire life. That's an enormous chunk of your existence, packed with firsts. First day of school, first best friend, first bike ride without training wheels. But at 40 years old, that same single year is only 2.5% of your life. Mathematically, it simply weighs less, and your brain reflects that shrinking proportion by making it feel like it passed in a blur. So how do we know this theory holds up? Researchers studying memory density have found that adults, when asked to estimate how long a specific month felt, consistently reported novel, adventure-filled months as feeling significantly longer than routine-filled months of the exact same length. The actual clock time was identical. The felt time was not. Neuroscientists also point to a related mechanism called neural efficiency. The very first time you drive a new route, walk through a new city, or learn a new skill, your brain works hard, firing constantly, building new neural pathways to process everything you're seeing for the first time. But once that route, that city, or that skill becomes familiar, your brain essentially puts it on autopilot. It stops encoding rich detail because it no longer needs to. That's why your daily commute barely registers in memory, while a single day of a trip to a new country can feel like it lasted an entire week. This experience varies from person to person, but the underlying pattern is remarkably consistent. People who describe their adult lives as monotonous, same job, same route, same routine day after day, consistently report time moving faster than people who regularly introduce novelty into their lives. And here's a question worth asking: if repetition genuinely erases the feeling of time, why does anyone fall into routine in the first place? Because routine is efficient. Your brain evolved to conserve energy, and automating familiar tasks frees up mental resources for genuinely new challenges. The trade-off is that this efficiency comes directly at the expense of how much of your life you actually remember experiencing. Today, this trade-off is more relevant than ever. Most modern adult life is built almost entirely around repeated structures. The same commute, the same meetings, the same weekend patterns, and our brains simply stop tagging these moments as memorable, causing entire months to blur into a forgettable haze. So how can you actually slow this down? It comes down to deliberately manufacturing novelty, taking a different route home, trying an unfamiliar cuisine, learning a new skill, traveling somewhere you've never been, or even rearranging your living space can be enough to force your brain back into that high attention, high encoding state. The goal isn't necessarily bigger life changes. It's more frequent, small disruptions to autopilot. Now imagine for a moment, stacking small moments of novelty into every single week of your life. A new recipe, a new conversation with a stranger, a new hiking trail, a new book. Over the course of a year, those small choices could be the difference between remembering your year as a rich, textured experience or barely remembering it happened at all. But let's go even deeper, because memory density isn't the only force shaping how time feels. Your brain is constantly making trade-offs between attention and efficiency, even in situations you wouldn't consider routine. Take extreme fear or danger, for example, a car accident, a near miss, a sudden shock. People often describe these moments in slow motion because the brain, flooded with adrenaline, shifts into an ultra-high encoding state, capturing an unusually dense stream of detail in just a few seconds. The speeding up of time as you age can also be influenced by external factors like how structured your days are and how much genuine choice you exercise within them. On a more technical level, scientists link the perception of time closely to the dopaminergic system, the same brain circuitry responsible for reward and novelty seeking. When you encounter something new, dopamine spikes, sharpening attention and reinforcing memory formation. As life becomes more predictable, those dopamine spikes become rarer, and with them, the vividness of your memories fades along with your sense of time actually passing. Here's a striking statistic. Some studies suggest that the majority of what we remember from an entire year of life comes from a small handful of novel or emotionally significant days. Sometimes fewer than 10 or 15 days out of 365. The rest of the year, filled with repeated routine, essentially disappears from memory, even though it was fully lived through in real time. Going back to the deeper mechanism at play, imagine your brain as a photographer with limited film. When everything is unfamiliar, it shoots constantly, capturing every angle. When everything is familiar, it barely lifts the camera at all. What's especially interesting is that this isn't a flaw in your brain, it's an efficient design choice, prioritizing energy conservation over exhaustive documentation of things it has already learned are safe and predictable. Some researchers even believe this same mechanism. Learning to stop attending to unchanging stimuli plays a foundational role in how attention itself evolved across many species, allowing animals to conserve cognitive resources for genuinely new threats or opportunities. Beyond humans, similar patterns of habituation appear across the animal kingdom, suggesting this trade-off between efficiency and rich perception may be a deeply fundamental feature of how brains process time and experience in general. It's a small but powerful example of how consistently biology favors efficiency, even when it costs us something as meaningful as the feeling of a full, well-remembered life. If you're curious, there's even a connection between this phenomenon and something called the holiday paradox, where a vacation full of new experiences feels like it flew by while you were living it, but feels surprisingly long when you look back on it later, precisely because of how densely it was encoded into memory. If you want to test this for yourself, try picking one single day this week to break your routine entirely. A new route, a new activity, a new conversation, and notice how differently that day sits in your memory compared to the days around it. Just don't try to overhaul your entire life overnight. Forcing constant novelty all at once can be exhausting and counterproductive. Small, consistent doses work far better than a single dramatic change. Here's a fascinating historical detail. Ancient philosophers, long before neuroscience existed, already noticed this exact pattern. Writers in classical antiquity observed that idle, repetitive periods of life seemed to pass unnoticed, while periods full of action and new experience were the ones people looked back on as truly having lived. Today, with modern neuroimaging, we can actually see this play out in real time. A measurable difference in brain activity between routine processing and novel experience encoding. An invisible mechanism quietly deciding how much of your life you'll actually remember, so the next time a week disappears and you can barely recall what happened in it, remember, it's not a personal failure, and it's not simply getting older. It's your brain running an ancient efficiency program, one that will keep compressing your life into a blur unless you deliberately feed it something new. If you found this fascinating, stick around for more strange and surprising stories about the human mind and how it quietly shapes the life you think you're living.